What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Week 1 of the 2023-2024 college football season has come and gone. What an exciting week it was. It was filled with so many unbelievable results, so many great games, fantastic finishes. Week 1 had it all, and there are a lot of changes to my top 25. Here, now this is my top 25 entering week 2 of the college football season. Before we dive into that, though, thank you guys so much for your support on the channel. Just in general, over the past couple months, it's been insane. In order to help continue to show your support, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when videos get uploaded, but there are more ways than that to help me support my channel. You guys are doing one right now by watching the video, and you guys can do more by liking, commenting, sharing, anything else you guys are willing and able to do to help me support my channel would mean a lot to me. So let's go ahead and dive into my Week 2 top 25 for the 2023-2024 college football season. But before we actually dive into the top 25, we got to talk about my honorable mention list. There were a couple teams that dropped out of my poll: Texas Tech, UTSA. You do not see those teams on screen. However, I do feel like they do belong in the honorable mention category. Just didn't really have room for them. But those are teams that did drop out that, hey, if they work on some things, they can break back in to being a top 25 team. One of those teams that also dropped out was TCU. I believe they are the closest. They are the closest to end up breaking back into the top 25. I think the Horned Frogs are going to do just fine even after their loss to Colorado. We'll talk about the Buffaloes more here in a little bit. You got two teams that are also coming out of the Big 12 in UCF and Kansas. So those are two teams that absolutely can break into the top 25. Kansas got a big one with Illinois coming up. I'll be previewing that game. I'll have a video up for you either tonight or tomorrow. And then when you take a look at some other teams out of the SEC, you got Kentucky, Arkansas, A&M, I think are really close to the top 25. Teams in the ACC, you got Pitt, Miami, and Louisville. All three of those teams ended up looking pretty good in their season openers. A team out of the Big 10 in Maryland, a team out of the Pac-12 in UCLA, and you also have a Group of 5 team here on the list in the Troy Trojans, who I believe are really, really good as well. South Alabama, Boise State, you could throw some of those names up on the board there as well. But let's go ahead and dive into my actual top 25. Starting out with 25, we'll work our way up to number 1. Remember to stay hydrated. Water is important. But the Colorado Buffaloes make their top 25 debut here in 2023. They got a big one coming up against Nebraska next week. But, man, what a job Deion Sanders has done. And Deion, I am sorry. I believe now. I believe that Colorado is here. I believe the hype. Colorado is a team to be taken for real. You got 2, maybe even more, legitimate Heisman contenders on that team. Shedeur Sanders set a school record with passing yards. Travis Hunter may be the two-way player that college football has been looking for a long time. Well, maybe not looking for, but maybe the two-way player that not a lot of people thought they needed, but the two-way player that they're going to get. Travis Hunter looked amazing as both a wide receiver and corner for the Colorado team. And overall, the team just looked spectacular. They add to the depth that the Pac-12 already has. I'm really excited to watch the Buffaloes throughout the season. They debut here at number 25, although if you put them higher, not really going to argue with you too much. There are just 24 other teams I like better than one of them being the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is the defense that I think is going to have superb This is the defense that I think is going to do some really, really good things this year. Iowa's offense has also improved dramatically, and I think that's the big storyline here, ranking them in my top 25. Cade McNamara did look really, really good. You have some other offensive pieces there that are starting to fit around Cade McNamara. Now, it is going to take some time for Iowa's offense to fully adjust, fully be able to break, or I guess fully be able to turn it around from last year. But the defense looks really, really good. There are parts of the offense that look way better than last year, and they got the Cy-Hawk Trophy game coming up next. But Iowa breaking in to my top 25 here. We also got the Duke Blue Devils breaking into the top 25, a team that I forgot to put on my honorable mention list last week, but you know what? They absolutely deserve to be in the top 25 here. Oh my goodness, Riley Leonard. If you do not know the name, my apologies. If you do not know the name Riley Leonard, go ahead and look up film of him against Clemson this past week. It was the only college football game on yesterday. College football fans, you better have been watching that. And it was, I'm not necessarily going to say a massacre, but Duke was controlling that game from start to finish. The Blue Devils looked fantastic in their win over the Clemson Tigers. Duke is a team to fear in the ACC with Riley Leonard. It's hard for me to talk today. I apologize. He's got a great group of running backs, a great group of wide receivers, a pretty good defense on the other side. They were able to take advantage of what Clemson gave them, and Duke watch out for them in the ACC. They're going to be very, very dangerous. The Blue Devils enter my top 25. Wisconsin is here at number 22. Now, Badger fans do not look at them dropping 4 spots as, okay, I don't like Wisconsin as much. Again, top 25s don't work like that for me. I still like Wisconsin. I still think they're the favorite in the Big Ten West. Tanner Mordecai, Braylon Allen, that Luke Fickell system, I think is going to work really, really well in Madison. There are just some other teams I ended up liking a little bit better than Wisconsin after what I saw here in week 1. One of those teams being the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll get there eventually, but for Wisconsin, hey, Tanner Mordecai looked really good. They were still able to run the ball with Braylon Allen. That passing attack definitely looked good. Ches Malusi, even a guy back there that often gets forgotten because Braylon Allen is there. He's really, really good. He showed out his skills in the Buffalo game, and they did have a little bit of struggles with Buffalo at times, but Wisconsin will be able to hone in their skills. They still looked pretty good there in week 1, and they will look even better as the season progresses. But I talked about the Oklahoma Sooners. Man, did they embarrass Butch Jones and company. I'm actually going to ditch the hat here. It's starting to bother me a little bit, so I am ditching it. But the Oklahoma Sooners looked really, really good. Their offense just absolutely exploded. The defense looked a lot better than it did a year ago under Brent Venables, which is what the Oklahoma Sooners needed to do, right? The offense, we knew it was going to be explosive with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, and it showed out in the win over Arkansas State. Now, the defense may still not be up to standard there of what Brent Venables may want to see, but it definitely did get a whole lot better. Oklahoma didn't move in their top 25 spot, but hey, you got SMU coming up next to the team with a lot of speed that'll really be able to test this Oklahoma Sooners defense. So there is 25 through 21. My apologies again, my throat's still been killing me. Let's talk now about 20 through 16, and we got the Tulane Green Wave, who I still believe up at this moment are the group of 5 champions. I maybe didn't believe that in the early season. I believe it now, especially after UTSA's loss to Houston. Tulane is the G5 champion until proven otherwise. Tulane looked very, very good. Michael Pratt was near perfect against South Alabama, and you guys know how I feel about the Jaguar program. Kane Womack is an up-and-coming head coach. I really like what the Jaguars have done, but Tulane looks really, really good, and that defense still looks really good. Tajee Spears, the loss of him doesn't seem to be as big of an influence as some people maybe expected it to be. Tulane is going to look really, really, really good this year, and they got a big game, a huge game coming up against the Ole Miss Rebels, who right now, I believe when I last checked, are getting 7 points against the Tulane Green Wave. That's going to be a huge, monumental game. Ole Miss, of course, with that dynamic offense, they were able to put up a ton of points in their season opening game there as well. 73 of them against the Mercer Bears, who again are one of the better teams out of the FCS ranks. Ole Miss looked really, really good. That defense seems to be taking another step in the right direction under Lane Kiffin. And the Ole Miss Rebels, hey, maybe if the SEC is going to have some chaos this year, the Ole Miss Rebels can definitely sneak through and end up taking a spot. But Ole Miss, I still really, really like this year. I think the offense looked good. Defense looked pretty solid. But again, they did play an FCS level team. They get a big test when they get to play the Tulane Green Wave. Again, my apologies. I'm so sorry. But Tulane and Ole Miss 19 and 20, they have a big game against each other this upcoming week. So we're going to be learning a lot about both of those two teams, as well. Probably more so about Ole Miss than Tulane, because Tulane did just play South Alabama, who again are a pretty good team, but still going to learn a lot about those two teams. Kansas State I have here at number 18, and again, Kansas State, kind of the same sort of story, right? So they did play a team in Southeast Missouri State that is an FCS level program. They shut them out 45-0. Ended up looking pretty good. Maybe a couple things you want to improve there, but I don't really have too much to say about Kansas State. Again, we'll, I think, find out some when they end up playing Missouri here in a couple of weeks. But for the Kansas State Wildcats, it's a team that I'm still very impressed with, still absolutely a contender in the Big 12 Conference. Again, they won the conference last year, still a team I think can go win it again this year. But there were some teams I ended up liking a little bit more than Kansas State from last week. One of them being the North Carolina Tar Heels. I was very impressed with this team. Offensively, I think we knew what the offense was going to be, right? With Drake May, it was going to be dynamic. And even though his top 2 leading receivers were gone from last year, and even though Devontae Walker, we still don't know the situation with him, North Carolina is a team that is going to do great things offensively. They still got a really good group of wide receivers out there. Drake May was able to throw it around to pretty much whoever he wanted when they played the South Carolina Gamecocks. But the thing that you should be, the thing that you should have watched for in that North Carolina game, in that, I guess, battle, the Carolina, North Carolina, South Carolina game, was the improvement of the Tar Heel defense. Now, I'm not quite sold on it just yet because I do think South Carolina has some real issues on the offensive line. But North Carolina, they play in the ACC. It's a conference that I think is getting overlooked right now in terms of some of the talented teams that are there. North Carolina's going to get to play App State, which is going to be a fairly solid test for them. But North Carolina, I'm not going to be all in on their defense quite yet. Again, it might be an overreaction of just one game. I did say in my takeaway video, I believe that defense is well improved and they can be ACC title contenders, which I still do firmly believe. 9 sacks generated. K'Mon Rucker, the star of the show. He looked amazing, but I want to see them be able to duplicate that performance before I can jump them even higher on the top 25. I think this team has wonderful potential on defense. I want to see them prove it week in and week out. They still, in my opinion, though, are not above the Clemson Tigers, who suffered an upset loss to the Duke Blue Devils, and quite simply put, Clemson is in quite a bit of trouble here. Cade Klubnik was overthrowing receivers all game, and while his stat line doesn't look terrible, this is the Clemson team that turned the ball over in some crucial times. Cade Klubnik had an interception. He ended up fumbling the ball, and both fumbles really for Clemson near the goal line where you were ready to score points. You cannot turn the football over there, and that's exactly what the Clemson Tigers did. There's a lot of things that are going to need to be cleaned up. Now, albeit I have faith that Cade Klubnik will be playing better football as the year goes along. I have faith that Garrett Riley will be able to get this offense up and running here fairly swiftly. So I do have faith that things are going to get better with Clemson, but if they do not turn around in a hurry, you got Florida State in 3 weeks, and we're going to be talking about their impressive performance a little bit later in this video as well. But Clemson, I didn't drop super far, albeit 7 spots is pretty far. They are here at number 16. But for the Clemson Tigers, you have a lot to improve upon here, and you have a pretty tough road ahead of you here as well. A couple winnable games coming up, but then it's Florida State. I mean, you get them at home, but we'll talk about how impressive Florida State was in their previous game. All right, let's dive into the top 15 now. Oregon State, the Beavers. This is the team that played on Sunday that I really, really, really liked. Damian Martinez is still a stud in the running back room. When you go ahead and take a look, my apologies, I'm so sorry. When you take a look at DJU at quarterback, he played really, really well. This is an Oregon State team that has a pretty solid group of wide receivers there as well. The defense, I thought, was up to standard, up to code. They played really well against the San Jose State offense with Siobhan Cordero. That, look, that's an offense that can score a lot of points. They proved that against USC, albeit USC has some defensive issues. But Oregon State, that defense looked really good. DJU looked really good. Damian Martinez looked really good. Oregon State is a team that you better start to believe, if you haven't already, that that's a team that can go win the Pac-12 this year, much like the Utah Utes. They absolutely dismantled Florida. I know the score maybe didn't seem like it was a little bit of a closer game than it was, but Utah absolutely dismantled Florida, and they did it without Cam Rising. That should be really scary. Utah's still a very physical defense. They're still a team that's going to punch you in the mouth, and now they're a team that proves to have a pretty solid passing attack. They got a really good group of wide receivers, probably the best tight end duo in the entire country. Money Parks had himself a game in this one, and Cam Rising didn't even play. Now, you do have a road game against Baylor, and Baylor has a lot to fix after their Texas State loss this past week, but Utah's a real Pac-12 contender as well. I really liked what I saw from them here this past week as well. Tennessee, I like what I saw from them, but there are just a couple teams I like more, so it doesn't, or I guess it forces Tennessee to not move in my top 25 poll. But when I look at the Tennessee Volunteers, the offense was explosive. It maybe didn't seem explosive at times, and there were a lot of mistakes in the first half, but they were really able to clean it up in the second half. And overall, Tennessee looked very, very good. I really like what I saw out of the Volunteers. They did play a Power 5 opponent in Virginia, but albeit Virginia probably not one of the better Power 5 teams in the nation this year. Probably one of the worst. But for the Tennessee Volunteers, defense I thought was pretty solid as well. So this is the Tennessee team that I really do think, especially with some of the struggles that Georgia had, we'll talk about that later, that can challenge Georgia, that can push for an SEC East title. I believe that with the Tennessee Volunteers. We'll see what happens with them moving forward. Texas, did unfortunately end up dropping a spot in my top 25 poll, but I still do not value Texas as any less. Sure, they ended up having their struggles with Rice. I think Rice has some pretty solid players on both sides of the ball, but the Texas defense only gave up 10 points to a Rice offense that I know is well more equipped with JT Daniels, some of the receivers they have out there to score a lot more than 10 points. And the Texas offense, maybe it took a little bit for things to really gel. But Texas has too much talent offensively to maybe have that poor of a showing. I think if they were to play Rice again in 3 weeks, they'd hang 60 on him. I think this Texas offense has an embarrassment of riches. Quinn Ewers and company still had their really, really good moments. And for the most part, I thought Texas had a very sound and a very complete game. And they got a big one coming up on the road in Bryant-Denny Stadium against the Alabama Crimson Tide coming up this week. That's game of the week. College game day is going to be, it's a big game for the Texas Longhorns. Water break. All right, let's go ahead and dive on in now to my 11th ranked team. They did unfortunately drop out of my top 10. There are just 10 teams I end up liking better than them. But the LSU Tigers, I mean, they got absolutely dismantled by the Florida State Seminoles. Same old problems with LSU that I'm seeing. The offensive line did not give Jaden Daniels really enough time to be able to find his receivers, even though Brian Thomas had himself a game there in Camping World Stadium on Sunday. But Jaden Daniels also got caught outside the pocket way too often. When he was trying to create, he would go down. That's a very fast, very versatile Florida State team, and you can't give them those opportunities to get the quarterback down outside the pocket. So LSU, still a little bit to improve, a little bit to work on, especially on the offensive end. But Jaden Daniels, this team are going to be fine. Brian Kelly's group lost to this Florida State team last year, still ended up going on to have a 10-win season. I believe that LSU is very, very capable of doing that again here this year, but I think it speaks volumes on what talent Florida State has on their team. LSU's definitely got some things to work on, and there are 10 teams that I like a little bit better than them, so LSU for me dropped to number 11. As now we enter the top 10, and the team that I've been really, really, really impressed with, probably the team that I've been the most impressed with, besides the team you're going to end up seeing in my top 5 here later, are the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Man, does Sam Hartman look good, and man, does that skill position room look good, and man, does that defense look good. Now, Notre Dame does get a pretty interesting test here. You got to go on the road to play NC State this week, but I just think Notre Dame looks phenomenal. This is the team that I'm believing more and more in that can go beat Ohio State. Earlier in my little preview videos I did during the offseason. Again, there really is no offseason, so I whispered that word now. Thank you, Josh Pate, for teaching me that. But Notre Dame's a team that has a really, really good pass rush. It's a team with Sam Hartman that can, with Sam Hartman that can air the ball out, that can create those explosive plays, that can run the ball, that can throw the ball. They're physical. Notre Dame's going to be a good football team this year. And they got a very hard road. It's a very hard schedule. We got a lot of interesting tests, but mark my words, they will be ready to play Ohio State on September 23rd. That they will. The Oregon Ducks have climbed up 2 spots here to the number 9 overall ranking. I mean, they absolutely poured it on Portland State, and they have a really interesting test when they go on the road to play Texas Tech, albeit I know a lot of people are going to look at that Texas Tech game. Well, you lost on the road against a Wyoming team that probably you may not know a lot about. Andrew Peasley was a game manager. Wyoming played really well. That defense is loaded with studs. Texas Tech just kind of ran into a situation to where Wyoming ended up looking like the better football team that day. And you know what? There really isn't a whole lot of problem with that. But Oregon on the road against Texas Tech, Tyler Shuck playing his former team. There's that motivation factor there. It's going to be a very interesting game to watch. But I really like how the Oregon Ducks look. I really like what Oregon is able to do here. Or I should say, I really like the way that Oregon has performed so far this season. Again, I like a lot of their transfers. Bo Nix is still proven he's here, and he is a Heisman contender. Oregon's up to number 9. And how about this? An influx of talent, or I guess not influx of talent, but a great deal of Pac-12 teams in my top 25, as we got Washington here at number 8, and they looked phenomenal. Michael Penix absolutely balled out. This wide receiver core was amazing. And the defense, while it didn't necessarily start that way, ended up coming along as the game developed against the Boise State Broncos. They held a Boise State offense that I think can be very explosive this year. I think Taylon Green's a really good quarterback. They got one of the best skill position rooms in the entire group of 5 to only 19 points, while Washington scored 56 of their own. I believe Penix had 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game to go along with over 400 yards passing. Washington's going to be really, really good this year. They looked very, very scary. Another team that can contend for a Pac-12 title. I don't think I mentioned it, but Oregon absolutely can too. But still, the Pac-12 front runner in my mind are the USC Trojans. Now, they did only allow, my apologies, the Nevada Wolfpack to score, what was it, 10 points on them? 10 points, 13 points, something like that. Trying to find the score here on my little scoreboard. 14 points. That's really all they allowed while scoring 66 of their own. Still maybe a couple defensive quirks to work out on that side of the ball, but Caleb Williams and the offense are spectacular. And this is the USC team that, again, has their first Pac-12 game. They play Stanford. And we'll kind of see what that defense looks like against Stanford Cardinal offense that, albeit played pretty well against a Hawaii team this past week. But for USC, it's just about to continue to show that improvement on defense. The offense is obviously there, and I think we all knew the offense was going to be there. But for the USC Trojans, it's about improving that defense week after week. That's what it's about. And Penn State is up here at number 6. Oh boy, am I starting to get really excited about the Nittany Lions if I wasn't already before. I always thought Penn State was going to be a really good football team this year. There were times during my offseason rankings when I had them in my top 20, or not top 25, obviously, but top 5. I had them at 5 for a very, very long time. And you know what? They're really close to breaking back into that mark. Drew Aller looked spectacular. That skill position room looked spectacular. I need more water. That defense looked spectacular. There are a lot of ballers on both sides of the ball. This could be James Franklin's best team he has had to date as the head coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions. They really are going to challenge Ohio State and Michigan for that division. Speaking of Ohio State, Michigan, you'll see them in my top 5 here. In fact, we're now going to go to my top 5 where I do have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, I am not one of those people, and again, you know the colors that I sport, you know the colors that I wear. I am not one of those people that is sitting here panicking about that. I'm not going to sit here and panic that Ohio State only scored 23 points on a pretty lackluster Indiana team, and maybe Kyle McCord didn't look great at moments, and the offensive line has a lot of work to do. But I'm not going to panic about the Ohio State offense, and I don't think you guys should either. It's an offense that's too talented to play as poor. And again, I use this with heavy quotes, as poor as they did last week. I still thought Kyle McCord played really well. There were some really nice throws. Give credit to Indiana's defense. They stepped up. They played a really, really good game. But this Ohio State offense, again, maybe Kyle McCord isn't the guy. Maybe you end up having to go to Devin Brown. We only saw him for around 3 snaps. The offensive line definitely has a lot of work to do, but Ohio State fell to 5. Well, and I should say before I move on from the Ohio State Buckeyes, that defense, Jim Knowles' defense has arrived. They looked spectacular. They looked really good. They stymied Indiana to, around 150 yards, and that was it. Yeah, Ohio State's going to have a really good defense this year, and the offense will find its stride. I have full confidence in that. But I didn't drop the Buckeyes to 5 because I'm starting to have doubts about them. No, there were just 2 teams I ended up liking a little bit better. One of them being the Florida State Seminoles, and I got to tell you, I've not been this impressed with a team in week 1 that I have been with Florida State in a very, very long time. Florida State looked spectacular. I really have nothing bad to say about the Seminoles. It was a little bit of a rough first half. Again, you had Jordan Travis make a couple of mistakes, but you know what? The second half, boom, it was like a light switch went off, and Florida State was really able to flip it. They were really able to score the ball. They were defending. They were getting to Jaden Daniels inside the pocket and outside the pocket. LSU could not do anything offensively. Florida State did pretty much whatever they wanted. And this is the Florida State team that, hey, I still feel really, really confident in picking them to go to the college football playoff. I think they're bona fide now, a top 5 team, one of the best teams in the nation. Mike Norvell is going to have the Seminoles rolling this year. You got Clemson in a couple of weeks. That'll be an interesting game to watch on the road there for them in Death Valley. Alabama, though, Jalen Milroe, I thought looked very, very good. That's an Alabama defense that is absolutely loaded. It's a skill position room that is absolutely loaded. Alabama looked fantastic against Middle Tennessee State. Now, albeit it's Middle Tennessee State, but Jalen Milroe kind of being talked about as like Jalen Hurts 2.0, right? Jalen Hurts incarnate. He's come back to Alabama in the form of Jalen Milroe. Now, for the Alabama Crimson Tide. You have a very interesting test coming up against the Texas Longhorns that's going to really test this team offensively and defensively. What's Jalen Milroe really made of? I think we're going to find out against this Texas defense that seemingly has improved from last year, and my focus being more on this Alabama defense. What's the secondary really made of when you have to go against a wide receiver core like the Texas Longhorns? It'll be very interesting to watch. I got Alabama here at number 3. However, my top 2 have remained unchanged. Now, Michigan, I don't think I need to explain why I still have them at number 2. Clearly, this is still one of the best teams in the entire nation. J.J. McCarthy looked absolutely phenomenal. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards looked really, really good. The wide receiver room looked good. The defense looked outstanding. This is a Michigan team, even though they don't have their coach Jim Harbaugh right now, that still one of my favorites to go win the national championship. Still absolutely one of my favorites to make the college football playoffs. Still my favorite to win the Big Ten. They looked spectacular even without their big name at head coach in Jim Harbaugh. But the team that I feel like I have to maybe do a little bit explaining about, and maybe why I don't have Michigan at 1 and Georgia at 2. Look, Georgia's offensive line did not have a very good day against UT Martin, an FCS school, which does cause a little bit of concern. But if we've learned a thing or two about Georgia before, it's that once you really start to doubt them is when they start to get really, really good, right? Georgia had this mindset last year that everyone doubted them and no one thought they could win a national championship. And I feel like people are starting to feel that same kind of sentiment about Georgia again here after week 1. They do have South Carolina here in a couple of weeks, but Georgia really doesn't get a full-blown big test maybe until Kentucky, maybe until Tennessee late in the season, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia's offensive line grows, develops, everything like that. But all in all, I thought Carson Beck looked good. I thought the skill position room looked good. And I thought the defense was superb there as well. So definitely some things to work on, especially along that offensive line. But all in all, Georgia looked pretty darn good and still my number 1 team in the nation as thus far. But honestly, guys, number 1 is really up for grabs. Let me know your top 5. Let me know your top 25 in the comment section down below. There were a lot of changes from my preseason, or I should say week 1 to week 2. You know there are going to be a lot more changes week 2 to week 3. So continue to watch, follow, support my videos, support the channel any way you can. It really means a lot. And remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.